Greetings, bike travelers and bike packers. Welcome to another episode of the Chainwheel Diaries, stories about bike travel told by the travelers themselves. I'm your host, Brian Berlin. Have you ever wondered about bike travel in the UK and Europe? Of course you have. My guest on today's episode, Geoff Morgan, is a UK-based bicycler who, like many of us, began his bike touring during the COVID lockdown. He has ridden extensively in the UK and France, and today he'll offer his insights into his experiences, gear choices, and route planning. Our conversation highlights the challenges and joys of bike touring, providing inspiration and practical advice for newcomers. And with that, let's meet Geoff Morgan. Geoff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great to have you. I haven't had anyone from the UK on the podcast yet. Your rides have been almost exclusively in that area, and so I thought it would be interesting for folks around the world to hear about your travels in that locale. But let's start with tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, what you're doing.
Well, firstly, thanks for having me again. My name's Geoff Morgan. I currently am still working. I'm still employed full-time. I've been cycle touring, I think, for about 5 years. It was COVID that really got me into it. But I've been wanting to go touring for many years. I think I bought in the early 2000s the book by Simon Doughty, Distance Cyclist Handbook, and that just started an itch, if you know what I mean, that I never really scratched. And as you say, I really just ride within the UK. I've been to France a few times. I'm wanting to go further, but I just, COVID with the lockdown in COVID, we cleared our shed out. And my wife found an old tent in the back of a shed. And I said, oh, great, I can go touring. And she said, go on then. So I did. and that's really how it started. It started very simply with just a couple of long weekends. And then I thought, right, I need a better tent. I need a better bike. Got that. And then I've just gradually gone longer and further. And yeah, I live just north of London. So it's not terribly scenic, but there's lots of rides around here, and it's very easy to get to other parts of the country. Challenges of putting a bike on a train, particularly within the UK, it can be, as I say, challenging. But yeah, that's really an intro to me. I mean,
we have something in common, Geoff. We both started bike touring during COVID. Right. And I don't know exactly how I stumbled upon him, but there's a influencer, Ryan Van Duzer, in the US. He lives in Boulder, Colorado. He's never owned a car. He only rides bikes. He was a Peace Corps volunteer. He rode his bike from Honduras back to his home in Boulder, Colorado. That was one of his first long rides. And he was my inspiration to take up bike travel. He has a motto, get out there. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you had something of a similar inspiration by reading Simon's book and gathering enough information. And I guess in your mind, you formulated, this is possible and I'd like to give it a try.
Yeah, exactly. And I think around just before COVID, I think I went to a show in London. It was the Adventure Holiday show from memory. Funnily enough, it was right next to the same show going on at the same time, which was RuPaul's drag show. And I came around the corner and I saw this great big long queue, and I didn't realize, and I thought, oh, they don't look like Adventure Holiday people. All these drag artists. Anyway, I got into, I saw a stand there with Cicerone, who are a publisher of tour guides and stuff. And there was a Cicerone guide there for the length of Wales. It's called the Lôn Las Cymru. and that was my first long ride. I saw the book, got the book. I am from Wales. I am Welsh, and I thought, yeah, I can get a train across to Cardiff. I can then cycle the length of Wales, and then get a train back. And it was the same sort of thing. And then it's gone from there. I don't know if you in the US you subscribe to the TV channel GCN, the Global Cycle Network. That had a lot of tour, adventure touring programs on it back a few years ago now. And there was a lady on there, Jenny Graham, who did a ride in the Outer Hebrides, and that inspired me. And I went and did that ride the year after I did the Wales ride. And then from there, it's just reading podcasts, things like this. Yeah, I can't say that there's any one thing that's inspired me. It's just I've just got out there. I've looked at the map. How can I get there? How can I get home? Right, let's go for it.
So I did look up Lone Lost Kimry,
Hmm.
and it was rated one of the more challenging rides available, and you chose that as your first ride. Now, I read your journal about that adventure.
Hmm.
Your journal describing the efforts you went through to find a train to get you to the route was incredible. Tell us about that.
Well, trains in the UK, particularly long distance trains, you have to book. You have to make a reservation. And that was the first challenge, was making a reservation on a train coming out of central London. Where I live, just as I say, just north of London, it's about, if I cycle door to door, it'd be about 3 hours. It's about 30 miles from my house into the centre of London. And you cannot take a full-size bike into central London in the rush hour. So basically, I've got to you can't go between 7 and 10 in the morning, and I think it's 4 and 7 in the evening. So that was the first challenge. And then getting a train that would get me down to Cardiff in Wales with a bike space was, booking the thing was the first thing. And then when you get on the train, the bike spaces are essentially broom cupboards. They are tiny. They are built for 1 or 2 bikes, and you have to lift your bike up and get it over a hook. And there's a hook coming out the ceiling. And what I found, certainly on the Great Western train that I took, and I haven't had this on any other train, but I couldn't get my wheel and tyre over the hook. So I'm stood there with a fully laden bike. I'd taken all the panniers off, and I was thinking, how the hell do I get this wheel over the hook? And in the end, I just left it there. I just thought, well, I can't do it, but how others do. And it's not a particularly wide tyre I had on. I think it was a 38, so it wasn't a huge mountain bike. How you're meant to get on a full-size bike onto those hooks, how you're meant to get a mountain bike on. I'm sure the train operating companies don't think of that. It's just a token gesture. We've got to put some bike facilities on. So that was the start point. But then once it was on and I was in place, then I wasn't getting off, so that was fine.
I loved reading your journal entry about the difficulty of making that happen. But once you figured it out, you were on your way. So
Yeah,
you're really jumping in with both feet on this bike adventure, and now you're off on your very first bike adventure, it sounds like.
yeah,
Um,
that's a big one.
and
Yeah.
it's a great journal. I urge everyone to read it on Crazy Guy on a Bike. But give us, a few more stories about that first bike adventure, other than what we can read in the journals.
Um, to be honest, it's a long while since I wrote the journal, so I can't honestly remember what's in it. I do remember the first campsite I stayed at was at just outside Cardiff in Sophia Gardens, which is the cricket ground. And as I pulled up, the guy looked at me and said, "Oh, have you got a good lock for your bike?" I looked at him. He said, "If you want, you can just lock your bike in the house, in the reception area of the campsite," because they'd had lots of incidents of bike theft, and that was quite disconcerting for a first night. Thinking, "Oh God, is my bike? Is it going to be over before it started? And what time am I going to get started in the morning?" I also remember that campsite. I parked under. I pitched my tent under a tree. And I came out in the morning, and I'm sure the birds had used my door as a bombing run. It was covered in, brand new tent, and it was covered in bird poop, and I was like, oh. And then, as you say, it is quite a lumpy route. You're going up the length of Wales, you're going up over the Brecon Beacons, going over the Cambrian Mountains in the middle of Wales. I lost all phone signal. Lost GPS, but you're on one road, so you can't really get lost. And then when I came up to Snowdonia, the actual official route takes you up through, I think it's Blaenau, and basically up a huge long climb. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. So I took the coast road, which was a little bit longer and a bit busier. And the other thing I remember was just the sheer feeling of exhilaration. I'd had a slog around Harlech, in West Wales on the coast. I'd gone up into the hills, and I was just feeling really sorry for myself. I was up on the moors, and then I just came over the brow of the hill, if you like, and I looked down. Oh, and I can't remember the name of the estuary, but I just looked down onto Portmeirion, the little village of Portmeirion. And I just thought, this is life. This is just, it was just, uplifting, if you know what I mean. It was just, yeah, despite all the hardships, despite the temper tantrums and, I'm not very good at this, just things like that just make it worthwhile.
How did you decide on your gear list for your very first bike packing adventure? You must have done some research, but I heard earlier you say that you upgraded a few items, a new bike, maybe a new tent. Tell us about
Mhm.
that.
So the original tent I had, as I say, was one my kids had. It's probably 30 years old. It had metal poles. It was a ridge tent. Honestly, I can't remember how I decided on the tent. I just Googled around, and decided on a Van Gogh adventure tent. I also did read somewhere that if you're going solo with a bike, go for a two-man tent rather than a one-man tent if you're on a bike. So of course I went for a three-man tent. so I've got a little Palace, but it's quite light. It's less than 5 kilos in weight. And in terms of bike, I had an old hybrid that I'd had for about 10, 15 years at the time. And that was fine, but I wanted something I could put front panniers on. And my first choice, and again, I can't remember the brand I went for, I was looking at. But when I went into the bike shop and said, you had to order it, they said, yes, it's a 15-month waiting list. And I thought, no, I'm not waiting 15 months. My wife's approved the expenditure. I need to do it now. And then I just went for a Specialized Diverge, which is a gravel bike. It's not pure touring bike. But that was really all the big upgrades I've made. Everything else has just been bits and bobs here and there. I had 2 panniers historically, so I bought 2 new Ortlieb front panniers, and then after a year or so, I bought matching rear panniers. Again, it's just based on reading, looking around, and seeing what the reviews are. So I haven't really taken, in terms of the kit list, there's lots of articles and journals and blogs out there of things. So I got the essentials pretty quickly of a sleep mat, sleeping bag, little cooking thing, and then everything else I've just added to over as I've gone. I've got a lot more than I probably need now. When I look back, my first trip was 2 panniers, and now I take 4 just for one night. Yeah, it's amazing how much stuff you accumulate.
I do the same. I belong to a weekend bike camping group, and
Mm,
we all have panniers front and rear. And passerby have from time to time asked us how far we're going because it looks like we're going
mm,
to South America. We have so many bags on. But the fact is that those bags aren't full, and it allows you to distribute the weight a little
mm.
differently and maybe a little more practically. And so, um, yeah, the four bag setup is kind of where I'm at as well too. We also share
Yeah,
something else in common. We like coffee, and we like coffee in the morning. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
I do have I have a pot that doubles as a coffee press. So that's the one thing that I won't leave behind.
Yeah, I've got an AeroPress. Um, um, I don't know if you call it a machine, but just an AeroPress. And I took it. I had a. I'm going away next week, and I had a shakedown ride a couple of weeks ago, and set the tent up, get up in the morning, making my coffee, or rather, I put the pan on for water, open up the AeroPress, and I got no filters. I hadn't filled the filters from when I went away in September. So I just, yeah, well, what can you do? Just had to look and think, oh well, I'll go without my coffee then. Um, I've bought a little coffee grinder this time as well, so I'm hoping I'll be able to grind some beans as I'm travelling. So it's a trade-off, isn't it? Do I take a grinder or do I take enough ground coffee to last me? So I'm going to take less coffee this next time, but take the grinder and uh, go with go with fresh ground coffee each morning.
Yep. Another thing that Americans might be interested in is that you reserved all your campgrounds in
Mm,
advance. And
mm,
in California, at least, we have state campgrounds that have what they call a hiker biker campsite.
mhm,
And if you're on foot or on a bike, you need no reservation. You can just roll up, pay them $10, and pitch your tent in an area that's set aside. Um, they're not near the latrines, and they do have running water. They're not near the showers, but they're within, you just walk
mm,
there, from your
yeah,
campsite. They have picnic tables and they have fire pits.
yeah.
And it's actually quite lovely. It's a pretty nice setup, but I was intrigued that you had to reserve so far in advance.
Most of that is my own paranoia, if you like, of being sure of where I'm going. Because I think if I left it completely to chance, I'd either go too far or not very far or not get going. So for me, I'd rather be organised and know I've got to go from A to B, and then I've got somewhere to stop. Um, to be honest, I would say there's only one or two occasions where I've turned up at a campsite that I booked, and I was glad I'd booked. Nearly all the time, because I'm going to France sort of typically the beginning of June, which is not peak season. Even if I turn up on spec, they've generally got spaces. And I do remember I turned up. I thought I'd booked a pitch at a site, and I turned up and said I've got a reservation, and they said no, you haven't. You didn't pay the deposit, but we've got plenty of room. So I think the reason I have thought about, do I just chuck stuff on the bike and just go? But for me, it works better knowing where I've got to get to, knowing I've got to start, and knowing I've got an end place when I get there. Um, some of the municipal sites in France, though, you can't book. So I have sort of winged it on a couple of occasions, knowing there is a municipal site. Generally, they're similar to what you've described. Generally, French sites, particularly if you turn up on a bike with a little tent, they will squeeze you in somewhere. I'm told. I've never tried it, but I'm told they do. So yeah,
So after your first ride, you, in your journal, you had kind of a lessons learned at the end, but now you're hooked and
yeah, yeah.
you're planning more trips. Now, we also share another something in common. We're both working full time, And so in America, we have, if your company is gracious enough, you have paid time off that you
Mhm.
accrue by the amount of time that you've worked. So I use that paid time off for vacations with my wife, but also for bike trips.
Mm.
Um, I imagine you're doing much the same thing. How does that work?
I've got a very tolerant, supportive wife. I think she also quite likes to get me out of the house. So, yeah, it's the same sort of arrangement. I think I get 30 days holiday from the company a year, and then I'll try and use. And typically, I won't use all of it. So I think this year I carried forward 10 days, um, and I'll probably carry forward another 10 days. So I'm using about 30 days, which is 6 weeks. And my trips are typically 1 or maximum 2 weeks, maybe a long weekend here and there. And that still leaves me 3 weeks for family holidays or long weekends with my wife. And yeah, she's very, very kind and supportive. As I say, I think she just wants me out of the house. But
Another
so
something we have in common. Um, so your second ride, did you make any adjustments from your first ride to your second ride, and what were they?
no, I don't think so. I think the big adjustment, because the certainly the second big ride was going up to the north of Scotland, the Hebridean Way, and the adjustment I made there was the temperature, because even the north of Scotland in June, May, June is quite fresh, let's say. Um, and so I took a thicker sleeping bag. So I bought a 3 season sleeping bag instead of a 2 season sleeping bag. But not too much. As I say, I'd have to go back through my notes and see what I did change. I think the big one was the temperature, and just taking slightly, maybe an extra couple of shirts and long sleeved tops as opposed to short sleeve tops, but nothing major. It's generally lots of little things, that I've changed.
Anyone who is listening to this and is interested in bike touring in England, you've
Hmm.
done several now. What would you recommend? What were some of your favorites?
Hebridean Way, the Outer Hebrides, is absolutely stunning. Getting there is difficult. As I say, it's in the far northwest of Scotland, but it was absolutely stunning. It was stunningly windy. It was very quite challenging riding, but the scenery is fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. I'm not sure if you've looked at that and some of the pictures that I took from that. I remember got off the ferry on the Hebrides, and the wind was about 25 miles an hour, and I thought, how the hell am I going to put a tent up in this wind? And yet somehow I managed it, and there were lots of others around, and we all just pitched in. Um, yeah, Scotland generally. I went to Scotland again last year, but a different part of Scotland, and it's somewhere I really want to go back to, and do more cycling. And Wales, of course. Wales is fantastic. I've gone Wales north to south. I've gone Wales east to west and back again. Um, I think those would be the big two areas. Peak District, the Yorkshire Dales. I mean, there's lots. Um, I wouldn't recommend London, but even riding in London is interesting. I commute to work, and I cycle past Buckingham Palace. I cycle past the Houses of Parliament. I cycle past the London Eye. Um, and I was thinking this week, because I'm hoping I'm retire next year. And some of this stuff, I just think, yeah, I take this for granted, but actually, it's quite cool cycling down the Mall on my way to work when the sun's shining, and yeah, it's yeah, there's lots around, and if anyone's looking for areas how to explore, there's a website called Sustrans, or an organisation called Sustrans, and Sustrans have got lots of cycling maps, um, of the whole of the UK. So it's easy enough to just get a cycling map and then plot a route around. And the other thing is the Ordnance Survey. The Ordnance Survey is I think it's a state organisation that produces maps. But on their app, it's got a map of all the national cycle network, and it's a free app. So you have to hunt for it a wee bit, but on there you can then zoom in, zoom out, and you actually have got a view of all the cycle network. So it then becomes one of the factors and one of the ways to plot routes around the UK.
So somebody who wanted to do a bike adventure in the UK, they could start in Scotland, or they could start in outside of London like you did.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume if you're coming from the US, for instance, you would fly into London. I've never flown with a bike, so I've no idea how that all works. But then once you're in central London, it's easy enough to, despite my challenges about and whinging about the bike spaces, to get a bike onto a train, get a train up to. I got the train to Inverness, which is right in the north of Scotland in the Highlands. It's an 8-hour train ride. But I mean, once you get past Edinburgh, the scenery is fantastic. And then you can get a train pretty much to all 4 points, depending where you want to go. As I say, as long as you book it, that's probably the quickest way to get around. Or, of course, you can cycle it. I mean, you can cycle from London up to these places. But for me, that's a bit more of a drag. Certainly with me, I'm a bit more time constrained. So I want to get there and then start the ride rather than necessarily ride from here up to Scotland. But yeah, Scotland, Wales, Northern England, even the south coast. There's lots of areas in the UK you can cycle around.
Best time of year?
Toss a coin. Toss a coin. Yeah. I would. The campsites, if you're camping, the campsites generally open March through to about September, early September, October. So anywhere in that time frame. And it could be raining, it could be sunny. Who knows what the weather would be? Yeah, I think the best time in Scotland though would be, I would think it's sort of April, May time, and then September, October, because the summer you've got the midges. You're nodding. You've heard of the midges. So you want to avoid Scotland certainly the Highlands in the summer. But outside those months, it's fine. But the weather, who knows? Who knows?
For the Yanks, a midge is like a mosquito or a fly or a combo. Okay.
It's like a vicious mosquito. And they're hordes of them. I mean, they just rise. I actually bought I'm going to say a hairnet, but one of these nets that goes over your head. Because they're not like mosquitoes, that flies in ones or twos. These are swarms of the things. But yeah, it's like a mosquito.
Your latest ride was Coast and Castle South, and that was this spring.
Last spring. It was last year.
Spring.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Tell us about that, and then we'll segue into your next trip.
Okay. So I'd actually bought a Sustrans route map of the Coast and Castles some years ago. And I was looking around at the start of last year for somewhere to go for a week, and thought, yeah, I can. That's, it's a nice scenic area. It's up the northeast of England into Scotland, into the Scottish border. The actual official route starts in Newcastle. I started a little bit further south in Durham, so I got the train from London up to Durham, and then cycled from Durham up to Newcastle. Cycled down the River Tyne, stayed in a hotel in Newcastle, and then as it says, it's the coast and it's castles. I mean, there's lots of big, I think 11th, 12th, 13th century castles on that area of coastline built at that time to keep the Scots away, keep the Scots under control. So it was very windy. Wind seems to be a theme of my rides, but it was incredibly windy. And the coast, although it's a marked route, it's also a lot of it's on grass, and I found it really hard work. I must admit, it was stunning, but it was really hard work. And I kept coming in and going on the road and then going back on the path again. But I'd love to do it again, and I'd also want to do Coast and Castles North, which goes then from Edinburgh north. So basically, I went up the coast, up Newcastle, stopped at the various castles, got to Berwick on Tweed, and then came inland alongside the River Tweed, and it sort of crosses and recrosses the border between England and Scotland. And then got to a place, I think it was called Innerleithen, and then basically went over the mountain to into Edinburgh. And again, it was a stunning ride that day. It was very very sunny. Wasn't particularly warm, I will say, but there was very few cars, and the number of times I paused on that ride and just stopped and listened to the birds, and also listened to my own panting and breathing. But and then you come down the other side, and you see Edinburgh down below you, and the Firth of Forth and the bridge, and yeah, it was a great ride. Love to do that again with slightly better weather. But actually, you said that was my last ride. I actually did a ride last summer. I went to France. I just haven't got round to publishing the routes or publishing the journal on the Crazy Guy site yet. But I went across to France for 2 weeks. It was about around the time of the D-Day commemorations, so the beginning of June. Started in Dieppe and then went along the coast to Le Havre. Covered most of the D-Day beaches, which if any of your listeners are going to the D-Day beaches, I recommend doing it by bike, because there's so many commemorations and memorials and just things around. It was a great way to see the beaches.
Is there bike infrastructure on the D-Day beaches? Are there bike paths or trails, or is it
Yeah,
just small roads?
a bit of both, because you're following the route of the Eurovelo 4, which goes along that coastline. So some of it was bike paths, and it's in France, so the bike infrastructure is pretty good anyway. So it is small roads, but it's also bike lanes. There was a lot of bike lanes right next to the beaches. Yeah, it's fantastic. And then I cut down and ended up at St. Malo, went past St. Michael, Mont Saint Michel.
And you were camping on this D-Day
Mm-hmm.
beach ride, yeah?
Yeah,
And there
yeah,
were
yeah,
good, well-organized campsites and
yeah.
facilities.
Yeah, I mean, again, I pre-booked, and this was one of the occasions I actually stayed at a site. I think it's actually called Omaha Beach, which is one of the US beaches, and it was very close to the Normandy Museum. It was very close to the US Cemetery, and that was the only beach. That was the only campsite on that trip where I turned up. I think it was 2 days after D-Day, so it's 8th of June, something like that. And as I pulled into the campsite, the woman just waved and said, "No, we're full." And I said, "I've got a reservation." "Oh, right, fine." And
Oh, wow.
that was full. That site was full. It wasn't particularly big, but it was full. And there were lots of reenactment people around, lots of jeeps and little things. So I think it was full because of the commemoration and lots of people there for that. But
Did you
otherwise, yeah.
plan did you plan this route, or did you
Yeah.
follow a route that had been developed before?
No, I planned it. Because going across that coast of France, you come to Le Havre, and there is a huge bridge over the estuary of the Seine. It's called the Pont Normandy, and it's it is basically, I think it's a 2-lane highway each way, and there's a bike lane, and you're about 100 foot up in the air. And the advice is don't cycle it. And I Googled and looked up, and some people were saying, no, don't even attempt it because you're right next to the road. Others were saying, yeah, it's fine. And I thought, I know it's been on the Tour de France, and it's actually featured as a climb on the Tour de France. So it's a hell of an ascent. And the thing that's scary is, of course, going down the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't do that. I came inland, cycled for 2 days up the Seine, got one of the little, they're called Le Bac. It's like a flat ferry, takes about 10 cars, just crossed the river and then came back. So I did an extra 3 or 4 days just up the river, so I didn't have to cross the bridge. But no, it's just Eurovelo 4, and then, as I say, I tend to I'll pick my start point, pick my end point, and then plot a route in between.
Well, I'll take a look at that. I've made a note of the some of the landmarks that you've called out. That sounds very interesting, very intriguing. What do you have planned next, if any?
Well, I'm going away in a week. So a week today, I'm in France. I've got 2 trips planned this year. As I say, first one's in a week. I'm going to Dieppe, get the ferry across to Dieppe, and then heading on the Eurovelo route north up to the Somme estuary, down the Somme estuary for a couple of days. It's like basically doing a big square. And then I come back up. I think it's the Voie Verte, which is a route that actually runs from London to Paris. But obviously, I'm just doing that little bit. So that's about a week, and then at the beginning of July, I'm taking the car and a tent and a bike, and going over for the Tour de France, because the grand depart of the Tour de France is in Lille, which is northern France. It's easy enough to get to, and I'm just there for again just over a week. 2 sites. One's quite close to Lille. I take 3-4 stages in there, and then I move across to Caen, where there's a time trial, and then the next stage starts at Bayeux, and then I'll do a day again over the Normandy beaches and that sort of area.
Do they allow cyclists to ride part of the Tour de France route, or is that not available?
Um, do they allow? Basically, they shut the roads very early. Yes, so the roads are shut from effectively all day, and certainly when I've been over a few times, yes, you can ride from sort of a bit of it, but at some point there'll be a policeman that will pull you over and say no, stop. There's quite a lot of tour vehicles. There's the caravan, the people chucking plastic tat out. That comes through, I think, about 2 hours before the tour comes through. So, but after that, it's empty roads, and I think if you took a chance, yeah, you can ride it. You won't be able to ride it very far before a policeman stops you, which is what I've found. But you can do bits of it, yeah.
I was always a little bit interested in the tour, but I got really into it after I watched a Netflix special called Tour de France Unchained.
Yep.
Where it follows the cyclists, but also the support teams and the behind the scenes. And I found it fascinating. So ever since I watched both seasons of that, I've been glued to the tour. Now it starts in the wee hours here on the west coast of the US. But the Tour de France site also has a live feed, so you can watch a kind of a map, not so much a map as a diagram of the ups and downs and the climbs and so forth, and it shows you where the peloton is and where the leaders are and who the leaders are. And so I got much more into it. And since I'm an early riser anyway, it's easy to watch for hours and nobody's bothering
Mm,
me. So, um, but yeah, it was the Netflix special that really got me hooked on the Tour de France. The training and the skills and stamina of these riders is it's incredible.
yeah, it is. Have you ever managed to ride with a pro?
No,
I,
unfortunately, no.
there's a ride. Garmin do a ride. Um, I think it's before the tour of the UK. They've done it the last couple of years. I did a 2 or 3 of those, and they get 3 or 4 pro riders from their sponsored teams to come along, and there's a talk, and there's bacon rolls for breakfast, and then you go out on this sportive with pro riders, and some of the pros will you know bimble along and they'll talk, and on other occasions I was passed by one guy who'd obviously stopped. I think he'd stopped. I was trying to catch his mates up, and I've never seen anyone go so fast.
Yeah.
it's
Uh,
just, it's just, I can't live with that. It's
you
incredible.
were talking in in your journal, your first journal about what we refer to as hike a bike, where you really can't pedal up the hill any further.
Mm,
You might as well walk. You can walk faster than you can pedal at that point in time. But I'm watching these tour riders go up 12, 13, 15% grades with a 60 some RPM. And I'm just astounded
yeah,
at their conditioning to be able to do that. But maybe they're not into bike camping as much as we are, and maybe we would do better there. Who knows?
yeah. I'd be a lot quicker if I didn't have panniers for sure.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give someone? Maybe the advice you gave yourself before you did your first tour. What would you tell somebody who's looking on the outside, looking in and thinking, I really would like to try this. How would you give them advice and tell them what to do?
Well, I think in a lot of things, it's the fear of the unknown is what puts you off, um, and it's never as bad as you fear it's going to be. And I think just the sheer exhilaration of getting out there on a bike, um, rocking up at a campsite, pitching the tent. I mean, I tend to then cycle off to a supermarket and get a couple of beers and come back. I just say get out there and do it. If you want to try it, don't be afraid of trying it. You don't have to go very far. I mean, my shakedown ride the other week, and you've said yourself, you do rides of 30 to 50 miles. I mean, that was what I did. There's a campsite from here. It's about 25 miles. It took me 2.5, 3 hours to get there. Went there on left at Saturday lunchtime, came back Sunday lunchtime. You haven't got to go and, do a big 3-week hike tour around the world or anything. I just say get out there and give it a go. I said to there's a lady in my team who was talking about doing, it's not a biking, but doing a 10K running race. And I said to her, just sign up. No, you'll never be fit enough in your own head. What you have to do is just sign up, get the entry in, and then do the training, because it won't be as bad. And once you've started, and she spoke to me afterwards and said, yeah, it's definitely type 2 fun, but she enjoyed it. But yeah, some of these things you just have to book it, then you can sort the logistics and everything else out. But just get out there and do it, I would say.
You have to make it real. You have to make the commitment, but you have to make it real. And like you say, set a marker and stick to it.
Yeah, it's like
But
having a
make it
target. Yeah,
exactly and make it real.
yeah,
Well, Geoff, it's
exactly right.
been fabulous having you on the show today. I've really enjoyed our conversation and your adventures. Again, you'll find Geoff's journals on crazyguyonabike.com. I suggest you read them. Geoff also includes lots and lots of pictures, and he saw lots and lots of things. But your journals are very candid, and I think people will appreciate that who are thinking about this and should definitely take it up. So
Yeah,
do
thank
take
you.
care.
Thank you again. Thanks for having me, Brian. And thank you.